So Officer Tatum, a self-described black conservative, comes out with a video where he's describing the incident of Elijah McClain. And I'm hoping that anybody who's watching this, because it's a response video to the video that he made, knows the story of Elijah McClain and what happened. So I'm just making that assumption. If you need to go and watch the video and get caught up on it, go and do that. And in that case, also watch Brandon Tatum's video, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. So he's a self-proclaimed black conservative and Trump supporter. And he comes at this from a different perspective. And I'm going to try to take his argument seriously. And what he says here is that he concludes, after, observing and talking about the facts of what happened, is that the common denominator in these incidences of police brutality is not, well, he says that the common denominator is resisting arrest. And when you have issues of resisting arrest, he says then, it leads to problems and whatnot. So he says that the police were not, the problem was not police misconduct in this incident of Elijah McClain. And I'm going to challenge him on this. And I'm going to challenge him from two different perspectives, because number one, he claims to be a black conservative, so I want to talk about that, but also just conservatism in general. Conservatives claim to advocate for limited government, and this is what bothers me. Because they advocate for limited government in areas where it is convenient for their conservative ideology, but they advocate for more government, and I explained this in another video, in areas where it's not convenient for their ideology. So, for example, when it comes to welfare, they advocate for cutting back on welfare, right? But when it comes to police officers, and I want to tell you what a police officer is. A police officer, if you look up the definition, this is what it is. It is an unelected bureaucrat with a gun. That's what a police officer is. We pay tax dollars to the police to protect and serve us. And the theory behind that is that for government to be able to rightfully exist, it needs the consent of the people that it is governing. So there's a right to challenge police authority. It's perfectly logical to reimagine policing, right? Because you need the consent of the people that you're governing. And this can be handled on a local city level issue. So each city can kind of have their own policy of what they want their police to look like and what they want their police to do and not do. Now, when he says, when conservatives say that they advocate for limited government, it goes out of the window. This blows my mind when it comes to police. The idea that systemic racism doesn't exist. And what are we talking about when we talk about systemic racism in the police department? I'm not saying there's a guy running the police department who's a racist that's telling them to go shoot up black people. Do you think I really believe that? Is that what you think I think when I'm saying systemic racism? No. I'm talking about an institution that disproportionately negatively affects African Americans that is not being changed, right? That's what I'm talking about when I say systemic racism. So someone says, okay, well, black people commit more crimes, right? So that might be true. But let me ask you this. Does having a high crime rate justify police brutality? No, it does not. And some people say, well, black people should worry about how many black people are killing black people and, not how many police are killing black people. Let me help you with this. If my neighbor shoots at my window or violates my rights, I have an arbitrator to go to, right? It's the government. I can take them to court. I can call the police to settle that. But if the government starts to violate my rights, who do I have to go to? That's the entire point of the Second Amendment. So when these is to curb out of control government. So when these conservatives who say we support limited government and we stand for the Second Amendment, yes, when it's convenient for you, but not when it's convenient for others. And that's the problem that I have with it. So you have these police officers, these police agencies that have police unions, right? That keep bad officers in high positions, that keep bad officers in office, in uniform, on duty, that fight reform, which reform, if the community says to the legislators, the city council, the mayor, we want police reform, the police do not get to say, well, we're going to form a union and fight against that. That is, they are public servants serving a community. They don't get to decide no. They do not get to say no. That's like the government saying no to the people that it has to get the consent to govern them. And then they are heavily placed in African American neighborhoods with this loaded power. That's what we mean when we say systemic racism. So when Officer Tatum comes to the conclusion, he says, well, Elijah McClain shouldn't have resisted arrest. Yes, that's true. You don't resist arrest, right? That's not right. But on the officer's side, Mr. Tatum, why did you make that arrest? Why were you trying to arrest Elijah McClain? Did you find evidence that he was doing something? Because initially, when I watched the video, Elijah McClain said, no, I'm not stopping to talk with you. And you have a right to tell a police officer, this is not a police state. It doesn't matter if it's inconvenient. It doesn't matter if, to me, he should have just stopped. Why didn't he just stop and, just talk to the police officer? He could have just proved, yes, that might be true. And if it would have been me, I would have just stopped and just talked to the police officer, and I would have just said, maybe, oh my gosh, they just racially profiled me, or whatever I thought in my mind. But I would have stopped and talked to the police officer or whatever, and I wouldn't have tried to leave. But it does not mean that if someone decides, no, I don't want to stop and talk to the police officer, that they do not have the right to do that. And we have to respect rights. The government cannot just do what it wants to do. So why did they make the arrest? Did they have evidence that he did something wrong? Was anybody an immediate threat, an immediate harm? So what I'm saying is, this situation could have been avoided on the side of the police. And Officer Tatum refuses to acknowledge that. Refuses to acknowledge. Because he wants the narrative that, I'm a black conservative and I don't believe that black people that there's systemic racism challenging black people. I'm different. Sir, people's lives are at stake. People's lives are at stake. If a person does something wrong, they're wrong. They're wrong. Resisting arrest is wrong. But on the other hand, when a government structure is wrong or unjust, it's wrong. Why did they stop him? Why did they try to make an arrest? Why are you arresting them? And the person has a right to ask you, why are you arresting me? They have a right to, if the police officer stops them and says, you have to stop, stops him and says, I want to talk to you. If a police officer stops me and asks me, I want to talk to you, I can say, no thanks, and keep going home. Minding my business. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He didn't have a gun, no weapons. He said, I can't breathe. I don't know how to relay this to you. When in MMA fights, if someone is being choked out, as soon as they tap, the referee comes and breaks it up immediately. When someone says, I can't breathe, it should be broken up immediately. So Officer Tatum needs to take a long look in the mirror. A long look in the mirror. Because sticking with the narrative for the sake of sticking with the narrative is not fixing anything. The question, yes, no resisting arrest. I agree with that. That's not a good thing to do. But my question is, why was the officer making an arrest? Why, officer, were you arresting him?